The video that you are watching is either obsolete or ahead of its time because the legislation that we are discussing has been postponed. The entire Tennessee legislature is taking a recess due to concerns over the coronavirus. But I still think it's worth watching this video because constitutional carry is extremely important. And it's interesting to see what the Tennessee representatives have been saying about the Second Amendment even a couple of days ago. So I just came from a Tennessee rally at the Capitol that was organized by Gun Owners of America and the Tennessee Firearms Association. Now you're probably thinking of the big rallies that we saw in Virginia, where tens of thousands of people came out wearing full kit and basically surrounded the Capitol. The Tennessee rally that I just attended was a little bit different. There were 200 or 300 people. We met inside the Capitol building, inside the old Supreme Court chambers. And after talking about some of the legislation that was up for discussion this session, we went out and lobbied to our individual representatives. The reps that are sitting in the Virginia session have a very different attitude toward the Second Amendment and their constituents' Second Amendment rights and freedoms than the folks in Tennessee do. And so responding differently makes sense. If you watch the media, if you watch the national news, you get the idea that all of the political movement in this country is bad. And it's certainly true that the movement of Second Amendment rights in the state of Virginia is really bad. The movement in the state of Maryland is really bad. The movement, if you listen to any of the Democratic presidential candidates, is terrible. But there's actually a lot of positive movement around the country, even here in the state of Tennessee. Now, the elephant in the room is Governor Bill Lee's constitutional carry bill.
Today, I'm announcing that we will be joining 16 other states in this nation by introducing a constitutional carry law in the state of Tennessee. This law would extend the constitutional right to carry a handgun to all law-abiding citizens with or without a permit who are 21 and older, except in restricted areas.
When he announced this last week, conservative press covered it as constitutional carry, and the more liberal media covered it as a dangerous and irresponsible permitless carry. Now, apart from the dangerous and irresponsible part, technically speaking, they're right. So what's the difference? Well, the Second Amendment is very clear and concise and to the point when it comes to this issue. It doesn't limit the people, it limits the power of the government to infringe upon the people and take away their right to keep and to bear arms.
We have all the rights, and when we wrote the Constitution, our forefathers, our founding fathers, they said we want to put government in a box, specifically put walls around that government, and that government has to stay in the box, and it's up to us to let them out. And us holding our Second Amendment is one of the tools that we have to keep them in the box.
Well, I just think it's so valuable that that we're able to keep that right to bear our arms. And
the Second Amendment is the guarantor of all the others. That is to say, an armed citizenry that has the power to resist a tyrannical government can keep the rights of the people secure.
And this was not for hunting, this wasn't for hanging on the wall to look pretty. This was for protection, not only of your person, your family, your home, but your rights.
The primary purpose is to protect our freedoms from a tyrannical government. And I was basic Marine Corps infantry, that's an 0311 rifleman. Before I was a sniper, and so I know what a basic infantry is, and in order to be able to defend our freedoms, we must be able to be equipped at least equal to that of the basic infantry unit.
People have an individual responsibility to protect themselves. So of course, if government disarms them, then you have no ability to protect yourself and do what you're supposed to do or protect your family.
But the ultimate check and balance to check is the Second Amendment that balances out the power between the armed citizens and the armed government. And that's the one that works so well you never even know it's there. It's like you don't miss your water till your well goes dry. Well, you don't miss your Second Amendment till you don't have it.
You know, I want to see constitutional freedoms given to the highest rate possible to all free men and women in the state of Tennessee, because it's not something that they should just be given as a privilege. It is an undeniable constitutional right, and really any infringement on that makes me really uncomfortable.
It's because the Constitution says you have a right to own and bear a firearm, carry a firearm. It doesn't say you have a right to carry with a permit. It says you have a right to own and carry, period.
When states take that right away and then sell it back to you in the form of a permit, that's what we have in a lot of different states, including Tennessee. And the bill that Governor Lee is running doesn't remove all of the bad code, it just adds exemptions so that Tennesseans will be free to carry without getting those permits in certain times and places.
If you carry a gun, if you're legally entitled to carry a gun, but you don't have a permit or you don't have one with you, you cannot get that misdemeanor citation that you can get today.
I think there's two interesting criticisms of Bill Lee and what he's doing. The first is that he's not a legislator, he is an executive. He represents the executive branch, which doesn't make law. So why is he making this law? Well, he's not making the law, he's only encouraging the legislators to pass it. He's presented it to them and they're interested in passing the bill. Anyone can do this. If you recall, we recommended a bill to some of our representatives last year and it got passed.
So earlier this year, we tried an experiment in our home state of Tennessee.
And on July 8th, 2019, the governor signed our bill into law, eliminating a 82-year-old unconstitutional tax on ammunition.
The second criticism is that this bill does not deal with the issue of constitutional carry properly. Instead of removing all the unconstitutional code, it just adds layers of exemptions on top of it. Now that is a legitimate criticism.
When I have constituents that ask about this constitutional carry, I'll tell them, it's really not a true constitutional carry. It's what it's being called. It's really permitless carry, but yet very thankful and will take it because 2 years ago this would have never happened. A year ago you could have asked me and I would say that this would probably be a decade away with all the right pieces falling in line just to get to where we're at with this piece of legislation with permitless carry.
Well, could it be stronger? Yes. Is this the bill that accomplishes probably 90% of what we want and we can get passed with almost universal Republican support and maybe even some Democrat support? Yes. You don't destroy a bill that's not perfect and have nothing. You take what you can get and keep trying to strengthen it.
So this bill raises an interesting point. What do we do or even say about a bill that practically does most of what we want, but principially doesn't do it properly? And more importantly, how do we interact with our representatives? I know for a fact that of the 52 co-sponsors of the bill, 2 of them share my views on the Second Amendment, believing that all gun laws are infringements. So how should I interact with the other 50? Is this an opportunity for us to find some common ground? Or is this an opportunity to talk about how far short of perfect this particular bill falls? Well, let's analyze the bill for a second. In looking at it, it appears to take one step forwards and not one step back, but kind of one step sideways.
Because I keep hearing the issues about guns in parks, guns in cars, but we're not moving back. We're not moving back at all. This does not change that language. And so I'd like to take it out, but at least we're not going backwards with this. This is a step forward.
And so my attitude is I'll take half a loaf now and come back for the rest later. If we can get this across the finish line, that's my half a loaf. And next year, if I get reelected or whenever, I'm willing to come back and try to get whatever's left. This is a good start as far as I can tell, though.
What we're doing is we're taking a step in the right direction, but we're not hitting the grand slam home run. And from that standpoint, I'd say yes. I'm very supportive of that, but hopefully it's just a first step.
This bill doesn't take us all the way to where we need to go, constitutionally speaking, but it does take us in that direction. And the bill does remove 2 of the main arguments that people in Tennessee have been making against constitutional carry. The first is that, well, the permit system actually generates the state of Tennessee an awful lot of money. This bill takes away that money and takes away that argument. The second thing is people argue that if people carrying guns in Tennessee don't have any training, well, we'll all be murdered in our beds.
Every piece of gun legislation is always met with the accusation of this is going to return us to the Wild Wild West. People are going to be laying dead in the streets. This is just going to be awful and terrible. And actually, that never happens.
So this bill will end up being a stepping stone for where we want to go, as long as we actually keep our principles in mind.
Well, and Governor, I'm going to start out by thanking you as well. When I look across this stage and see people who have served many years in the legislature, I see people who have carried a similar bill. I see people who have voted for a similar bill, but we would not be here today if it wasn't for your leadership, Governor, so we appreciate you.
We have a governor who said, the Second Amendment is so important to me that I'm going to make this bill as part of my legislative package.
It's just nice to be able to stand there with other men who truly believe the same way, and we're all focused on one goal, and hopefully we can get it accomplished.
We have moved the ball down the field. We need to be appreciative of that. There are folks in Tennessee that have been trying to see a constitutional carry bill for years. And now we have a legislature and a governor that has an appetite for it. I feel like that is such a unifying message for the folks of Tennessee.
So although there's been literally decades of work conducted here in the legislature, when you have a person who believes in constitutional freedoms in the way that Governor Lee does, that helps enable a legislative body have that extra little nudge that's necessary when some of our members are kind of sitting on the edge. They, sort of those guys that find themselves on the fence on a lot of issues. And I don't want to give all the credit to the executive branch, but were it not for the governor and his leadership on this issue, there's a very high likelihood that it would not happen this year.
It's something that the governor wanted to do. It's something that he wanted to stick his neck out on. It's something that he wanted to take point on and really lead. And the reason for that is there's been a substantial change in the culture.
I didn't know anyone that carried firearms as a child. I never knew anybody really that carried firearms till about 10 years ago when I got into law enforcement and started to see how many folks actually do exercise their rights that they have, even though they're limited because of a permit.
When the Republicans took over in 2010, we started passing gun bills. And we passed about 40 gun bills. We're in better shape than I ever thought we would ever be in Tennessee. It's unbelievable.
Folks are very passionate about this, and it's good to see that our young generation, I'm not a millennial, but it's good to see the millennials that are very passionate about their constitutional rights, because obviously they're what makes our country great. They're the reason that we're free.
If we look at the way that the concealed carry debate has been happening in America and concealed carry capability has grown over the decades, it's tremendous positive movement. If we look at the way that constitutional carry has been adopted by state after state after state, well, that is tremendous direction. And I believe that we're seeing a really positive direction here in Tennessee, as represented by, admittedly, a non-perfect bill. But the fact that the governor and so many representatives want to move in this direction is something that we should come alongside and encourage them in.
I'm extremely encouraged already. Constituents and folks coming to the chamber to see this legislation pass, I'm already encouraged. So I would tell the folks to keep doing what they're doing. Keep calling your representatives, keep calling your senators, keep coming out and showing your support for the Second Amendment.
You have to capitalize on the momentum because it takes each generation has to build on it, embrace it, know it, and pass it to the next generation.
Even though this is an excellent opportunity to poke holes in the bill, point out the things that it doesn't address, point out the ways that it could cause glitches and bugs to occur in the future, I think that would be missing the point. The point is that we now have an excellent opportunity to call our representatives and senators, if we live in Tennessee, and encourage them for taking the right step, actually pushing a bill that gives us some forward movement in the area of firearms freedom, and to encourage our governor by telling him that we actually appreciate this. But for those of you that don't live in Tennessee, this is also an opportunity. Because at a time when the media is focused on Virginia, focused on Maryland, focused on presidential candidates that talk about gun control and gun confiscation in almost every single speech, the fact that Tennessee is going the other way, the fact that the representatives that Tennessee voters installed are pushing this forwards, the fact that the Tennessee governor is personally making this move, that's national news that affects the cultural game all the way down. Remember, we've seen a lot of positive movement over the decades. We shouldn't forget that. And anytime that we see positive movement today, we should make sure that we figure out how to capitalize on it and how to encourage the people that are doing the work to move the ball. So the bill is not going to be heard on the floor next week, but we do need to keep it in mind, because as soon as the emergency is over, we want our legislators to keep pushing this legislation. Now, the other side is going to use this break in momentum and the confusion of the pandemic to push their agenda. But we need to be ready as soon as the legislature reconvenes to let our representatives know that we still want this and that we still stand with the men and women who are fighting to remove infringements and restore our rights. And we will keep you posted on when that happens. And thanks for watching this video.